Hi guys, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about the last few years before the actual outbreak of war and secession by the South. This is kind of the last major important years. The tentative peace that we've had for the last 5 years is starting to really ravel apart and fall apart, right? We've already had the Bleeding Kansas incidents, the Pottawatomie Creek and the raid on Lawrence, Kansas. We've had the Sumner Brooks incident in Congress. Society is starting to feel like it's very fractured and sectional, that we can't really get along. And so for today, we're going to talk about the actual disintegration of the Union. That what is going to happen that finally makes Southerners say, that's it, we're done, we're rebelling, we're breaking off. And if you can see here, here's actually a map, and this map has a number of states that are actually missing. And the reason why is it's some of the first states that really start to secede away from the Union. So today in your notes, you need to have this listed as A Decade of Crisis Part 3, and make sure that you really have any questions that you need down in your notes, because this is a really important section. So the video title for this is The Last Straw, and it's the last straw for a number of groups, both Southerners and Northerners, and even kind of fence sitters. It's hard at this point to still be sitting on the fence, to be kind of wishy-washy and not knowing who you're going to support, but it is possible. And this incident really is kind of one of the big things that pushes most people either to pro-slavery or abolitionism. And that's the Dred Scott decision. This is a Supreme Court case. The actual technical name is Dred Scott versus Sanford. And Scott was a slave. And in 1834, he was taken by his master to Illinois, which was a free state at the time. He's eventually bought by an abolitionist, and in 1843 he sued for his freedom because he had said he had been in a free state and that he should be free. He shouldn't even have to pay for that because he'd already been granted it, right? He's also wanting to bring his family along as well. The Supreme Court is actually going to take the question on and say, well, here's the big thing. To be a citizen, or to be free, do you have to be a citizen? And that's the question that they ask themselves. And if he was moved from one place to another and one place was free and the other place was slave, did that make him free, right? And so the court ends up finding that, in fact, African Americans are not citizens, and that slaves are not free citizens either. They're, in fact, property. They deem them the same as your plow in your garden, or a horse or a cow, right? They're part of your property, and therefore slave owners can do whatever they want to with their property. If they want to take them to a free state and then back home again, they are allowed to. If they want to beat them, they basically are allowed to, because it is their property. This enrages Northerners, and anybody who is really kind of sitting there thinking, I don't know, I'm not so big on this whole slavery issue, but I don't know if I want to get involved, that's going to die away with this decision, because what it is basically saying is it is dehumanizing people and comparing them to cattle and property. And they're taking away and stripping the last vestiges of a person's personal identity. So there's a number of big events that happen, and the Dred Scott decision is the first one, and the next one is the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Now, we're going to read a lot more about this in class, and so I'm going to kind of give you the Cliff Notes version, the really short version of it. But in 1858, there is a race for Senate in Illinois, and there's two guys who are going to run for this post. Stephen Douglas, who's already there, and the challenger, Abraham Lincoln, who is part of a new party called the Republican Party. Now, Douglas is very well known. Douglas has been part of everything. He was there for the Missouri Compromise. He's there for the Compromise of 1850, right? He's even there for the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which strips away the 3630 parallel rule, right? Because he wants to build that transcontinental railroad in to basically line his own pockets with money. Now, they're going to run against each other, Douglas being a Democrat, Lincoln being a Republican. And the winner of this, most likely, many people thought, would be President of the United States in 1860, particularly Douglas, because Douglas is so well known and he's becoming such a national figure. And the Republicans really want to stop Douglas, so they pick Honest Abe, they pick Abraham Lincoln to challenge him to 7 debates. The main topic is going to be slavery. That's it. That's the main thing. Sure, they'll talk about trade and other things, but the main issue is going to be that of slavery. Now this kind of gets a nickname of a fight. It's the little giant, Stephen Douglas, because he's a very small man, versus Honest Abe, right? This man who's supposed to be seen as this pillar of the community, almost statuesque, right? He comes off as this very virtuous man. Lincoln, as you can imagine, it's very comical to see the two of them. Lincoln is very smart, but he's also very tall. He's 6'4". Douglas, for that matter, is a short man, but he's also very smart, and he's a very good orator. He knows how to speak passionately. The results of this election are that Douglas wins. But here's the thing. He also creates what is known as the Freeport Doctrine, which really does hamstring him in the long run. He says slavery cannot exist without laws to support it. And that's important, because now what he's saying is, he's kind of going back against some of the things he's talked about before, where slavery should be popular sovereignty. He's saying now, you almost need laws to help create slavery. That Freeport Doctrine spells doom for Douglas. He'll eventually run for president, and it will hurt him drastically. One of the things that it does do for Abraham Lincoln, those debates, is it makes him a national celebrity. People begin to see him almost overnight as a viable figure for public office. He had been in the House of Representatives before, but he had never really been a celebrity. Now, he is a big deal. But on the horizon, there is another event, and it is our buddy John Brown. Now he is bearded and crazy, even crazier haired, and he strikes again. He still has not learned his lesson from Pottawatomie Creek. He got away from that. He was never captured. But this time he decides to raid an arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. An arsenal is where weapons are stored. The idea is he wants to raid this arsenal, steal the weapons, give them to slaves, and encourage the slaves to rise up against their masters and rebel. He's hoping to create insurrection, another mini civil war in Virginia. Oddly enough, one of the leading generals at the time in Virginia is Robert E. Lee. He's fighting for the Union at this point, and he ends up actually attacking John Brown and his forces, suppressing the fight, and capturing Brown. And Brown is eventually hung for his treasonous acts. Now, here is the thing, and this is one of the most important things. If you are a Southerner, you are really freaked out by this point, because there has been now a slave rebellion with Nat Turner. There has been increased slave rebellions around the country, and now you've got whites who are encouraging slaves to rise up against their masters. It is going to create a very paranoid situation. Okay, so there's a fourth major issue that's gone on. We've had Dred Scott decision, we've had John Brown, we've had oh my gosh, I can't even think of all of them now, right? But we've got the election of 1860 is the next big one. Oh, there's Stephen Douglas debates. That was what it was. The election of 1860. This is the big one, all right? You have 4 candidates running for president. You have the Southern Democrats in John Breckinridge. You have the Northern Democrats in Stephen Douglas. You have the Constitutional Union Party in John Bell. And you have the Republican Party in Abraham Lincoln. Now, you can see, obviously, from this picture, Breckinridge gets some of the majority of votes for the electoral college. He pretty much sweeps the South, other than Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. But Abraham Lincoln gets 40% of the popular vote, and he wins with 180 electoral votes, which is not the required amount, but he does win the majority. So as a result, he becomes president of the United States. Now, if you are the North, you're pretty happy about this. You're willing to take that, right? If you are the South, you are going to throw a hissy fit. Lincoln does say that slavery should not spread, but he will not eliminate it. But the South says our way of life is in danger, and we must secede to save our way of life, to save our institution of slavery. So on December 20th, 1860, South Carolina becomes the first state to secede from the Union. They separate by February 1st, a couple months later. Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas all do the same. And as a result, many of the members of Congress return back to their home districts. In the South, they literally cut off ties in many cases, and they begin to set up a government. The first capital for the Confederacy is Montgomery, Alabama. The Constitution that they create is very similar to slavery, except for, as you can obviously tell, the Constitution is very similar to the United States Constitution, except for, you can imagine, they add the clause of slavery being guaranteed. They also make themselves a confederacy, which is important because they don't really learn from history. Remember the whole Articles of Confederation about how it was very hard to be able to tax and do things like that and to run a government that way? Yeah, they didn't really learn history very well. And so they create a confederacy, and that's going to spell problems for them in the future. Jefferson Davis becomes their first president, and the North ends up responding with what is known as the Crittenden Compromise, and that is basically an amendment to the Constitution that says, please don't leave, right? We'll let you keep slavery where it is, and we promise we won't eliminate it, but we just won't expand it. It fails, and that was kind of the last gasp of the North to try to keep the South involved and keep them as part of the Union. What we will find out is that as soon as South Carolina secedes, they are going to want a fort off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, called Fort Sumter. That is going to lead to the first shots of the war, and eventually the first battle will be the Battle of Bull Run, or Manassas, and we will have war. And so that's it. That's all you need. Make sure you have all of this in your notes. Any questions that you have, make sure you have those down too. Remember, these last 6-7 videos here are some of the most important stuff. That's the things I'm really going to ask you about on your test. So if you have questions about this, if you're not sure, if you're concerned, if you don't understand something, take good notes, ask good questions. This stuff is very important. We don't just go to war willy-nilly. We go to war because people don't necessarily talk to each other and they don't necessarily see each other's side. But we also go to war because there's fundamental differences between the North and the South. We'll talk much more about this in class tomorrow. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.